Hey, John.
Hey, Jenn.
What are you listening to this week? Welcome to What Are You Listening To This Week, the weekly podcast where we talk about our favorite songs. Some old, some new, all good. I'm Jenn Tully, and this week I'm joined by musician and media tech entrepreneur John Zozarro. John is a change maker who's passionate about the convergence of media and technology. He's dedicated to building community and providing innovators access to networks, education, tools, and capital necessary for their success. He's mentored hundreds of startups globally and currently serves as director, partner, and mentor for Media Tech Ventures and Canatech Ventures. This week's episode has some great songs, old and new. And now on Spotify, you can listen to the show with the songs we discuss incorporated. Just search for What Are You Listening To with Music. If you're not listening on Spotify, be sure to give the playlist a listen and then tune in to our conversation. With that, let's get started. John, what are you listening to this week?
Great question. There's a newer band called The Courts. It's actually a friend of mine's son, and I saw she posted it randomly on like the video on her Instagram as like a story, and the riff was just incredible. So the song's called I Don't Feel the Same. Again, new band, and I'm a big rock and roll, white denim, raconteurs,
Yes.
Black Keys fan. So this really is a song for people that are really into psych rock and really good rock and roll riffs.
So agree. And I have to say, too, this also brought me a little bit of like Royal Blood vibes, which I also love. And so I was super stoked. I was telling you before we started recording, this song, people I meet on the street, I'm walking up and making listen to this song. I love it so much.
Awesome.
And I think that they're a relatively new band. Am I right? I think that I think like 2 months maybe they've been.
I believe they only have 2 songs out right now.
Okay,
So.
yeah, I think you're right. This single and another were released on July 15th of this year, and they have another song called "Few and Far Between," which is also good. It's a little bit like slower tempo and maybe a little bit more psychedelic. But I think if you're going to listen to a song by them to like get a feel, "I Don't Feel the Same" is just an amazing jam. And listen loud. I've like our neighbors are probably wondering what in the world. Well, they're not, because they hear loud music coming out of my house all the time.
They can't be surprised.
They're not actually. But yeah, this one I'm like, turn it up to 11 and just like go nuts. It's so good. And they have a new single, I think, coming out on September 6th called Kenzie that I'm like dying to hear now because I'm so stoked about these 2 songs.
I've had the song on repeat in the Roto frequently since first hearing it probably 3 weeks ago now.
Oh, so good. Well, you have to keep your eyes peeled since you're based in Chicago. If those guys are playing anywhere and I can get there, I will be at the show. I'm dying to see these guys. What else have you been listening to this week? You definitely brought our new song this week. Everything else, we're taking it back a few years. So I have to thank you for keeping us fresh by bringing the Courts to my attention. But what else do you have on repeat this week?
A lot of Daft Punk, in particular, Aerodynamic, and I'll never forget. So I joke with my wife all the time. I missed my calling as like a '90s French house DJ, and I still want to make. I'm recording music now that I hope eventually DJs will spin. A little bit different than Train Company in other stuff I've released in the past, but I'll never forget the first time I saw Aerodynamic on I think it was MTV, where they have like the music video with all the characters, right?
Yeah.
And they have like that beautiful story for Discovery for the entire album, And it's funny if you're into anime or whatever, and you look at Captain Harlow, which was like a really big influence on them when they were younger. There's a lot of similarities in the characters and how they look and the storyline that they have for Interstellar. And with like the world of NFTs and Web3 for artists and creatives, I always think back at how well I think Daft Punk was breaking the barrier between different mediums and media, right? And it wasn't just about music. It was incredible stage presence. It was cartoons, right? Like they really were outside of the box thinkers with their own craft, on top of making tasty tunes, of course. So Aerodynamic has definitely been in the rotation quite heavily the last couple months.
Such a good song. And I like Daft Punk too. They're one of my favorites. And when I was going, it's funny because I always think of this, and it's probably because this was the album that I discovered them, the Discovery album, which was released in 2001. And the big hit from this album was One More Time. That's the one that everybody knows. But I really, in like digging into this episode, did not realize that they started making music in 1993 as Daft Punk.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it went back that far.
Yeah,
so,
well, and that was a really big part. I mean, like the Roulette was the label, and it's funny, like if you're familiar with the band Phoenix. But they have a song called Phoenix on their first album because they all used to jam together, and they're all from France. And so, yeah, like they're, it's in Homework. I mean, in itself was groundbreaking at the time too. But yeah, they're just incredible artists, musicians, the full package, right? And I think definitely can learn a lot by looking at what they did and how to apply that in today's Web3 economy for artists and creatives.
For sure. And how they continue to sort of churn out sounds that are new. And I love, too, that you called this out earlier, that they're a French band, but they often, in interviews I've seen with them or read about them, they were super influenced by like Chicago and Detroit, like electronic and house music. So
Home
we're
of the
thinking
house music right here in Chicago.
That's right.
Yeah.
See, we're thinking of them as like, I always thought like, oh, they're French and so cool. And then turns out like they're completely influenced by like American music. But what they did with it, I think, is where the magic sort of comes in. And you'll be interested to know that this is the first instrumental song we've had on the show. I think that was cool. I was like, all right, big props for that. And I think the interesting thing too is that even though this is an electronic song and it is, EDM, it also has amazing guitar riffs. I'm like, you really brought the guitar riffs for me between the Courts and this song. I was like, way to go.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Two wildly different songs stylistically, and I was struggling with the second one. I mean, there's being a professional musician myself for so long, It's like, man, two songs out of my rotation right now. Like, what? So the Courts was easy. I was like, yeah, the Courts for sure, right? Like, new band, awesome tune. But number two, I struggled with for a while, for sure.
Well, and I have to tell you, too, because whenever, I was so pumped up by the Court song and listened to it probably 10 times before I even got to the second song. So when the second song, like when I hit play on, I didn't really look and see what it was. I just like hit the link that you sent. And I thought at first, because I was so pumped up from the Court song, that it was For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I knew you were going to say that.
I did. I'm like, did he just bring Ride the Lightning? All right. Okay. Like, there we go. Yeah. So I was pleasantly surprised when it was Daft. Not that I don't love Metallica, and actually the Ride the Lightning album is probably one of my favorites. But yeah, I was like, oh, okay, it's Daft Punk. And I liked that it was older Daft Punk too. I think everybody loved Random Access Memories. It's a great album. It's, I don't know that it's top 10 for me, but it's top 25. I would say top 25. And so I love that you took it back all the way to Discovery.
In Discovery too. I mean, Daft Punk really, especially around that time for me, I was definitely learning more about music. And I hadn't quite started doing it professionally. But I remember seeing that video and always in the back of my head, I'm like, man, like, I would love to do something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so, like, the whole video, the feel, and, like, the whole narrative. Like, if you watch that entire Interstellar and with the Discovery Like it's an incredible piece of art. And it does tell a great story, and there's no words, right? Like it's all Daft Punk music. It's so cool.
It's so good.
And it's like early 2000s, and it's like you don't see a lot of that today, you know?
Yeah.
And it just blows my mind with technology and where it's at, especially with projection mapping and immersive experiences. It's like why we need to start adopting a lot more of this stuff into what we're doing as artists, because it's there and it helps create a better experience and a new experience, especially in like venues where the experience hasn't changed in decades, right?
It's so true. It's so true. And I think you see that with some of these big shows that are coming out and the way people are handling them. And again, like I said, I think we were talking about this before we started recording, but apparently the Courts have a visual artist that's in the band too. So with their show comes sort of this visual experience. And I love that. I think that, artists that are doing that are really pulling together the whole show. That's why Daft Punk is great live. It's why, I love seeing the Gorillaz live. It's why a lot of those bands are just like there's so much to get involved in when you're watching them. It's not just listening to the music, and I do love that. Well, for my picks, I definitely took a hard left from where we started, and I chose a song. It is. I chose a song called "No Rain" by Blind Melon. So when I picked this song, I'm like, listeners are either going to love me or they're going to hate me for including this song. So I'm sure send all your DMs to @SuperAwesomeMix. I'm sure we're going to get some about this one. But what I'll say about the song is that I watched All I Can Say, which is the documentary about Shannon Hoon, who was the lead singer of Blind Melon, who tragically passed away in 1995 from a drug overdose. And he basically shot home footage of himself on an old camcorder from like 1990 to 95, and they've put this footage together, and you get this really interesting, like not only a picture of him and the band and sort of what this like rocket ship to stardom looked like in a particular time and place, but it's also this weird like countdown, like if you know the story of Shannon Hoon, every time you see a date and timestamp at the bottom of that camcorder image, like you start thinking like, oh my gosh, this time next year he's not going to be here, or like, oh my gosh, in 2 weeks he's going to pass. Like it was really that was something that was interesting that really made me think about this song again, and also make me think, and I'm curious to get your opinion about this, is were they a one-hit wonder, or is this song like so iconic that you have to pull them out of that category? I mean, the opening of the song is instantly recognizable. Anytime you hear it, that's it. The B-Girl album cover, the video. I mean, to me, it kind of falls more into like the iconic category than the one-hit wonder category. What do you think? What are your thoughts about this song?
Well, I mean, no doubt that was, what catapulted them, right? Like, and... But no, I mean, I recall, I mean, they had a couple, right? The Change.
Change is a good song. Paper Scratcher on that album is a good
Wonder,
song.
Right? Like, I mean, they're definitely, they definitely put in the work. But, like, it's just, I think about a lot of artists that passed away young, and I'm like, man, like, what kind of music they'd be making today,
Yeah.
I think about that often. The Janis Joplins and the Jimi Hendrixes and
sure,
and then John Lennon's of the world too, right? Like, man, like what would they be doing now?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that I mean that track is just so iconic, and everybody knows that song. I mean, it's hard to, especially in the U.S., like it's hard to like meet anybody. Maybe like the 18-year-olds nowadays, but everybody else, especially the 80s and 90s kids, like everybody knows that track.
Yeah. Well, and for any of the 18-year-olds that are listening, like go back and give this song a try. You may
That's a good one.
You may really dig it. And then I have to call this part out too, because I'm big every show just about I talk about what a lyrics person I am. The lyrics are so important to me. So misunderstood lyrics are like my favorite subgenre of my love of lyrics. And let me tell you that I was years old when I realized that I have been singing this song incorrectly for 30 years. So are you ready for me to drop some like ridiculous lyrics on you? Here we go. I'm admitting it so that I can have my say whenever the next person comes on that's misunderstood lyrics. So the part where he says, I'd like to keep my cheeks dry today. So he doesn't want to cry, right? I'd like to keep my cheeks dry today is the lyric. For 30 years, I have been singing, I'd like to keep my cheating strategy. So there you go. My cheating strategy is really my cheeks dry today. So go back and listen, though. It does sound like cheating strategy.
No, I'm sure it does. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's hilarious. I'm always like, that happens more times than it doesn't, though.
It does.
Like everybody's got like their own version of the song and the lyrics and how they remember it. And you're like, that's not. They're like, wait, this song's about what?
Well, and especially before like karaoke and Spotify, the way you looked at lyrics was like you'd open like the album cover, or the CD and read the liner notes, So we didn't, because I was even thinking about that. I usually any song we have on the show, just like for clarity and to be sure, I go back and read the lyrics, and I literally almost skipped doing it this time. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I know every word to that song. I'm not even going to look at the lyrics. And then I looked at it and was like, ooh, oops.
Oops. Oh
guess I missed that one. So yeah, cheating strategy. That's a funny one. Well, but then even for myself, I took one hard left and then I took another with my second pick, which is a song called Tomorrow Never Knows by the Beatles. Now, I mean, where do you begin with the Beatles? Like, this is from their Revolver album. And I love this song because this is the Beatles that I love. Some people like the Michelle, like I Want to Hold Your Hand Beatles. I am all about like 1966, 67 Beatles. Like those are my favorite. Sure. I love the Revolver album. It's got most of like my top 5 favorite Beatles songs. It's got She Said, Good Day Sunshine, Got to Get You Into My Life. And then of course, Tomorrow Never Knows, which I just think is amazing. Definitely pull up the lyrics to this one if you're not familiar with them. This is like Lennon McCartney poetry at its finest. I think. Go
ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, I mean, like, and if you look at like the progression of the Beatles, right? I mean, it was like I think right after Rubber Soul, and it was right before Sgt. Pepper's. Yeah. Right? And like you can hear them kind of going. Right, like psychedelic era, right?
Yep.
Like Pet Sounds, and I mean, it was definitely a different time for sure. And I think it was a really good, I think, window into them kind of maturing with the culture, especially in California, right?
Yeah,
and really kind of spitting this album out with all of the influence from that time.
Yeah, and it's so funny that you called out Pet Sounds because that was a note that I wrote about this song, and something I've always thought about it is just for 1966, the production on this song is insane. It's super progressive. And so I wanted to know, I'm like, which album came out first? Did Pet Sounds come out first or did Revolver come out first? They're both from 1966, but Pet Sounds came out in mid-June of 66, and this album was early August of 66. So right there, but you've heard the story 100 times that it was either John Lennon or Paul. Actually, I think it was Paul McCartney said that God Only Knows is a perfect song, which is obviously the Beach Boys song that was on Pet Sounds.
That was my wedding song.
Ah, such a good song. I love that song too. I could do a whole episode about the Pet Sounds album. Love. But it was like, that's where you can really see that influence. Like they're using the distortion, the sound samples, the tape loops, like everything that you could want in a song today or in the past, I feel like is in this. And whether it's, the seagulls sound, which I learned was actually Paul McCartney laughing at double speed, or the
That's
guitar.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's him. It sounds like birds, but it's his laugh that they sped up. And then the guitar and sitar phrases, they sped up and reversed them like Missy Elliott style. I mean, it's just, right. It was so cool.
I got to meet and talk to Jeff Emmerich multiple times. We actually almost ended up working with him at one point. And unfortunately, he's passed away. But yeah, like, I mean, he was their engineer, man, like through pretty much all of their stuff. And then George Martin too. I mean, a lot of the piano, a lot of the composition, and a lot of the orchestral, charts were George. Like he was really good at helping them bring their vision to life.
For sure, and especially on this song.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think George says his favorite song is "Strawberry Fields." That was his. He's been known and quoted saying that multiple times. But then you think of somebody like Brian Wilson, who deaf in one ear and just charting out all that stuff and leading the way. And unfortunately, obviously, it's taken its toll. But he's still making music, and so is Paul. And it's gonna be a weird world when that era of musicians, the Rolling Stones and the Who and the Beatles, when they're no longer here.
It will be
Eric Clapton, all the blues guys and stuff. It's just going to be a different world, I feel like.
I agree. A sadder one. It's like that's why we have to. I had this rule in my house. I have, I've mentioned on the show before, I have a teenage daughter, and I had a very strict, like, no kids music in my house when she was little. I'm like, if you want to listen to music, we're not doing any kids bop. We're not doing any wiggles. Like, we're going to listen to real music. And if you want something wacky, we'll pull out the Revolver album. We'll pull out Sgt. Pepper's. We'll pull out Magical Mystery Tour. Like, so that's been like my mission, is I want to make sure that, like, she knows. And nothing makes me happier than when I hear her playing, a Beatles song for her friends, or playing, a Cream song for her friends, or like, she actually loves the Rolling Stones. So I'll often hear like Gimme Shelter or something like blaring out of her room, which is always proud mama moment. So that's my contribution back, is to make sure that the kids don't forget these amazing musicians that paved the way.
I mean, Cohen's playlist on Spotify is so eclectic. He actually he knows every word, and he could sing Queen. What is it? Don't Stop Me Now.
Yes.
And he crushes it. Like, I couldn't believe it. He like pulled it out one day at a friend's house. He's playing with his buddy, and he sang it. But like, this kid's got, oh my God, here it is. Like White Stripes, Rage Against the Machine, Jack White, Foo Fighters, Led Zeppelin, Iron Maiden, The Champs, Spencer Davis Group.
Parenting win. Parenting wins. We're doing it. We're keeping the kids informed.
Yeah.
Well, John, thank you so much for sharing what you're listening to this week. This has been an awesome episode. And to learn more about John and the work he's doing, visit the MediaTek website at mediatek.ventures. That's mediatech.ventures. And to our listeners, please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.